Those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
And then I said to the guy, "No, I'm Tobin." Oh my! Oh, hey, you're back. I was wondering where my audience went. Was here talking to a complete nobody. Okay, I was talking to the Grinch. He's a mean one, Mr. Grinch. I don't think he really listened to me. He's kind of stuffed, if you know what I mean. Anyway, welcome to another episode of Tobin Tonight. You're probably wondering, Tobin, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. What happened? I understand we have shown some repeats in 2 weeks. I'm going to tell you why. And even if you don't care, you're going to hear it anyway. Don't be such a Scrooge. So what ended up happening was, yes, I did get a clean shaved before Christmas. And you might notice like my nose is still a little red right there, kind of sore. I didn't have the flu, didn't have the cold, got lucky. Knock on wood for that. However, I did get sick, had to go to the hospital a couple times in the last few weeks. Listen, I don't know. Maybe I should do like a PSA for like people with acid reflux, because that's what it was. But it was really bad, people. It was bad acid reflux. But regardless, let's get to this week's episode, because people are like, "Shut up, Tobin. We don't care about you. We care about the act." And I get that, because I don't even care about me. I don't think my parents care about me much either. But that's a different topic for a different time. So with that being said, this week's guest is Jessie T. She's a Canadian country singer from Kingston. I believe she's from Kingston. If not, that's kind of where she's situated. We discussed it all on the podcast. Don't worry about it. But she has a new song out called Margarita, or I Can Be Your Margarita, whichever way you want to preference that. It's really catchy. It's really kind of a really different kind of tune, I found. And we've been trying to get her out for about a year, and we finally got her. And honestly, it was just a timing issue. It worked out great because she has a killer background for this. Really works for December because it is Christmassy. So we talk about her song. We talk about how she got into music. We have a fun game at the end of like random questions. I think a lot of people like random questions. We talk about superpowers. We talk about things we take on a desert island if we can only bring one thing. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. And listen, any feedback you give me is awesome. Hold that thought. Positive feedback you give me is awesome. Negative feedback, I'll take it. I'll accept it. I'll use it somewhat as humor. It will crush me inside, but I'll get around to accepting it. With that being said, I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas and enjoy the episode. Man, I know. I can't believe they wouldn't believe me that I was talking to somebody. Yeah, you're not a Grinch. You're just misunderstood. Welcome to the episode. We're here with Jessie T. I want to ask you, I feel like this is probably something very common, and maybe it's like people like, really, that's your first question, but does the T stand for Tobin? No.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, it was. It's my last name. So Trenier is my last name. But when I first started kind of gigging around and stuff, I've obviously my real name is Jessie. That's a truth. But okay. I found the spelling was kind of all over the place. Yeah. So I just ended up going with Jessie T kind of out of convenience, and it worked out pretty well. I don't know. There's like a little zing to it, you know? So that's where we stuck with it.
That's fair, because I feel like if you put it up on like a marquee or something, it's like Jessie, and then it's like, how do you pronounce that? How does that work? It's
exactly.
Like I see names like in hockey because we're Canadians, so people know the reference. But it's like Taves. When I remember watching a World Junior and seeing that when I was a child of Taves on the screen, I'm like, that's Jonathan Toews. Like, no, it's not. Or it's like, you know, people are like, Sydney. You named a guy Sydney. I'm like, yeah, but now it's cool because it's Sidney Crosby. So
exactly, it is so true. Well, and there's a lot of people that do go with their last names. But it started as like a way to kind of do the cover band thing,
Yeah.
which is how I started. I started playing kind of a bunch of covers in different local pubs and venues and stuff like that. And so it was out of convenience for that. And it just kind of continued to work.
That's fair. I want to ask you, like, where did you get your kind of musical influence too? Because I know a lot of people will say they had a family member involved, or at a young age they were involved in music, but like, where exactly did it come for you?
So I totally grew up in a household that was just like full of music. My mom was baking like Christmas cookies or any sort of like baking. There was always music going. My dad played guitar. So he used to come home after work and kind of throw his feet up on the table and noodle. So I think the love of music and just kind of being immersed in it came at a really young age. But the first time I remember thinking that like this was something that I was interested in doing was we used to go on family camping trips.
Okay.
And with my dad's side, and we all used to sit and play guitars around the campfire. And we had a Last Kiss by Pearl Jam was our family song. And I just remember thinking this would be so cool if I could like play guitar and sing so my family could sing along. So that was when like, I think that was the first taste of the bug that I got. I was like, okay, we need to do this.
Sure. And like, at what age did you really like develop it? Because like, listen, like, I can sit here and say I watched like Steve Eiserman and Mario Lemieux play hockey, and I'm
Yeah.
like, man, totally think I could do that. And then like you go and try 15, you put on your skates, and then you're like, all right, I wasn't never in hockey when I was like 7 and 8, so I'm already behind.
Right.
And then by that point, I'm like, I just like it for fun, but it never really drove as a goal. Like it was always like, okay, that's a pastime and I like it. But then like when I was maybe 20 odd, I was like, man, it would be cool to be on SNL. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe I just want to maybe I just want to have conversations with people and develop that. But like, at what crossroads do you think you were like, you know what, I'm going to take this seriously? It's not just going to become like a pastime.
So it's an interesting question because, I face that every day is whether or not it's what I will continue to do. And I think as if most musicians are being honest, about once a week, we consider doing something else. But especially over the last few years, there was a part of my heart that I really learned that I would never honestly be happy unless this was what I was doing. But I started taking piano lessons at 8. And then I started vocal lessons at 13. And my dad put a guitar in my hand when I was 15. I made this like shitty little karaoke CD for Christmas. My uncle got me recording time, and it was everything from like Evanescence, Anna Nacklick, Gretchen Wilson.
You got to
Carolyn
find that one. Yeah.
Oh my God. I hope you can't. But and we gave one of these things out to everybody that we knew, and one of them made its way up to a producer in Kitchener. And that was when kind of the original side of music really I became aware of. And then I think at that point there was a dedication to the idea of working at this as a craft.
Okay.
Then at 20, there was a dedication to kind of moving to Kitchener to kind of take this more seriously, be closer to the music. So there's been that kind of, to answer your question, there's been different points in my life where I've kind of had to make a decision on whether or not music was something I was going to do full time. And so I would say seriously, gigging started 17 and then probably 20 when I moved to Kitchener.
Okay. Now I know you said like you moved closer to Kitchener to be closer to like say production and music wise, but like I'm just curious from, again, this is a small-minded Newfoundland opinion. Some people out there right now are going to cancel me because they're like, excuse me, I'm a Newfoundlander too. We don't have small minds. I'm like, okay, I'm saying it because the question I'm about to ask is going to be like, why? But like music side country, people usually go say Nashville, down to the States, and they give it a shot. Why Kitchener? Was it just because you were just kind of like just trying to dip your foot in the water and just be like, hey, I don't want to make that big of a move quite yet?
Yes, I've made a connection with a producer up here, Rick Hutt, that I was kind of working with on and off from the time I was 15 to the time I was 20. And I kind of got to the age at my parents' place, and I think we've all been there. It's like, okay, I think I need a little bit more freedom. And realistically, nowhere else really made sense. It was like, I'm still within a drive that I can head home if I need to. I had kind of made a few connections with different local artists and musicians up here, so I kind of knew some people moving here, and there was no real decision made. We came to look at like apartments just as like, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
And that weekend I signed my lease and I was gone a month later. So everything for me as a person, when I make decisions, it's like I think about them and stew on them for so long. And then once it gets made, it's like a month later, we're already in it. Like there's no time to
read. Okay. I want to ask, because like to get into the context here, a little bit of the music side of things as well. Like now you mentioned about if you go to your social media, you can see the behind the scenes stuff. I want to do a little bit of promotion for the actual song itself. So tell people the latest song. I've heard it. There are times when I look at the music video and I'm just still like, interesting. I like that you kind of told people like where you shot it to, because I'm just still like, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have just been like, that's probably shot in a high class, like fancy place. And then when you're just like, no, man, this is like, just a tiki bar that I go to. I'm just like, all right, cool. Like there are people out there that are like, what's that supposed to mean? I'm like, no, it just means that it's awesome. And it's like, it looks great. But
it's a local venue.
Yeah. Tell people about the song and just a little bit like, I know it's still kind of early out, but how have you received like the reception been? Have people been like, shut it off, go home, Jessie T?
You suck. So yeah, the song is called I Can Be Your Margarita, or Margarita for short. And it was a song that we wrote during the pandemic. It was really just to hang with a bunch of my buddies. So Rich Cloak, David Madras, Greg Williams, and myself. And we called ourselves like the dream team, but we basically were sitting down and trying to write through this like really complicated love idea. It wasn't going anywhere. And Rich was like, does anybody just have like a lighthearted, easy idea we can tackle?
Yeah.
I was like, I do. I had this idea kind of comparing myself to Margarita. And the song really and quite quickly wrote itself. It was a bunch of inside jokes, like just supposed to be as hilarious as we could make it. And I never really imagined it as a single until I started playing it live. Because at that point I would play it by my folks or like, my friends on the phone, and people really started responding to it. So I was like, okay. So I started playing it on live, and I started playing it, when we could play in bars and stuff. And just the live response from it was really what kind of drove me to record it as a single. And then the video itself was shot at a local bar here in Kitchener called the Grand Surf, which has amazing drinks. And they're in these like really cool, like tiki glasses and like burnt pineapple on the sides and like the little umbrellas. You feel so fancy. And that was like immediately was where I wanted to shoot this video. I had no idea what I wanted the video to be about, but I knew that I wanted to include them. And it was actually my boyfriend that was like, we should do this. Like, why don't you do like a margarita making competition where no one knows what's in a margarita? And I was like, that is genius. And so it's a bunch of my buddies, again, Rich Cloak, David Madras, so two of the writers on the song, Josh David, who's like a phenomenal artist, and my boyfriend himself, were the four guys in the video. And I let each of them choose their own concoctions, which was an oversight on my part.
Yeah.
And we were like, how chaotic can we make this? And I'm so happy with how it turned out. And just there's been such a positive feedback from the song itself and from the video itself. I think it's just like, it's a different side of my character that people haven't really seen before. You sit down with me in a conversation and I like to joke around. I like to be funny. I usually am the only one laughing at my jokes, but I think I like to be funny. And so this kind of was the ability to show a little bit of that side of myself for the first time. So it's been pretty cool.
I feel like if you had your time back, you probably would have been like, you know what? Like, I know I'm letting them come up with this idea of making their own margaritas, but like, let me just rethink that one, because it's like literally like you're just still like, why did I agree to this?
Yeah,
like I look back at some ideas that I have that I greenlit or like let my buddies be involved in, and I'm just like, okay, like he's my buddy, but maybe not the wisest choice here. Like, and then sometimes you're just like, okay, that does make sense. But to each their own. I mean, you look at the hindsight of it. If it does well, you're like, genius. If it doesn't do so great, you're just like, all right, blunder, but we learn from it. But so far, so good. So that's where we want to head. Yeah. I want to ask, because especially now where you mentioned in 2016, you had like your first kind of album, your first kind of, I guess, CD out, and now it's been this long. Like, I know you, prior to mentioning it, said that this was a whole process of writing, developing your craft. So like when you eventually release your, I think it's in 2023, I read that you're coming out with one. Like, what are you more excited about? What's the process there? Because if you're kind of like a mindset of like, hey, I'm trying to develop things, I'm trying to like think this whole story through. What was the whole mindset of 2023, and what things did you think you changed from the first time around?
So it's interesting. I was at a writer's round with Nicole Ray a little while ago. There was like a bunch of like female artists. It was one of her all women shows. And there was this running joke about an artist's version of Soon. Okay. I have new music coming soon. I have a new album coming soon. There's a video coming soon. Soon can be anywhere from like 2 weeks from now to like 3 years from now. And this album has been a little bit of that. We got a local grant, Waterloo Arts grant. Thank God for funding. But that was really a kind of stepping point to the end date of this whole thing. And I had kind of a whole catalog of music that obviously I had collected over the years, but with getting this grant right before the pandemic, and then to the point of the art that we kind of created throughout that time, there was this new influx of like stories that kind of came out of me and out of some of the experiences that I had during that time. And it just really felt like the right kind of catalog. So with, the album previous, a lot of those were my kind of highlight stories to that point in my life, the highlight songs to that point. Whereas these kind of collection, it'll be a little bit more mature sounding, because obviously it's been 6 years. There's a lot less about alternative characters, and it's more like personal kind of like point of views, I guess. Okay. But Title Track, which was my last single that was released, and Margarita will both be 2 singles off of that. And then we're going to have another one out probably early February, March. And then the album should be in the spring.
Okay. And like, was there anything like particular in mind of why you chose like spring per se? Or was it just more or less like, you're like, hey, I want to have time for these songs to kind of be out there and see where they go, and then an album? Because some people are just still like, coming out with a Christmas album, like, it is September. Can we at least let it settle in? And then some people would be like, November 1st, hey, like, and they prep for it for a while, but then they're just kind of like, hey, November 15th, hey, I'm coming out with a Christmas album December like 3rd, and you're like, quick, I like it. Like, I know you worked on that for about a good solid couple months, but at least you didn't just plant it on me in September and like, hey, I'm like, we haven't even got through Halloween.
We haven't got there yet. Yeah. And even like I'm doing like a super soft kind of just in these conversations, letting people know there is a project coming, but it was really, again, the end date that just kind of kept getting pushed. We released Title Track in October of last year, and we were hoping for Sirius XM, obviously, for it to get on there, and it didn't until January. So and then once it was on for a few more months. So then all of a sudden, the idea of releasing another song at the end of January didn't make sense anymore. Yeah. So we were kind of like, okay, well, let's ride this wave. And then when Margarita was ready to come out, we're like, well, it'd be weird if I just released one song and then an album. So let's release Margarita. And then you're not going to release an album at the beginning of the year, because then you can't tour it. So it's like, well, let's do 3 songs and then have the album in the spring, and then that way I can kind of shop it and sell it, hopefully for people through the summer 2023 shows.
To kind of clue it up, we have a fun aspect that we like to play. I'm just going to see if it will generate here for me. It's called Random Question Generator. I think it's fun because I kind of lose the aspect of the podcast, and people are like, good, he shuts up, and I'm just like, hey, mom, stop.
Yeah,
but
stop.
Yeah, there's a stop. This is my time. So we'll play a game, and if you don't want to answer the question, just throw it to me.
Okay.
We can come with another one, or I can answer it.
Okay.
So this one's a little bit cheeky. I feel like it's a hard one, but because a lot of people are humble and modest, I'm not.
Okay.
But like, what was the best compliment you've ever received, like your whole life?
I ever received. I don't know why this is not a good compliment, but I remember
Yeah, I always remember the good, like the bad ones.
yeah, right. I remember bartending once, and this guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, you're a pretty good singer for a waitress," and I was bartending at the time. Now, that is definitely not the best compliment that I can think of, but for whatever reason that stuck out, and I've always said if I was a better bartender, I'd probably be a shittier musician. So I'm gonna say there was a lot of like things I could have dug into, but I was taking that that was my life path I was supposed to follow.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
That's hilarious. I thought you were gonna say soup or
Yeah. Well, if you could have any soup or power, what would you have? It's like obviously the power. I don't want
obviously the soup, of course. If I could have any superpower, I would say oh my god, I'm blanking on what it's called. When you can like just teleport to different places or like yeah, like like just going wherever. I would say that would probably be a superpower I would love because like so much of my life is driving and I'm always like 15 minutes late. It depends on who you ask. Some people will say more. But like my folks, since I was been a little girl, have said I always try and fit 27 hours in a day. So if I didn't have to drive someplace, I think that would significantly improve my life. And that would be my answer.
I feel like mine would be to read minds. Not like, you know, like I can deal with flying, I can deal with traveling, like because I'm not like overly big on that. But like to me, because I'm also a dude, it's like when it comes to like a dude talking to another dude, instantly I know if we connect or not. When it comes to like me conversation with like a girl or like a female, especially when I was in university, it would be good to know right off the hop. And I don't even have to say it out loud. It's like, I know you're not interested, but if I'm just like, hey, it's like we play soccer together, and their mind are just like, oh God, I'm just like, all right, generally just have a nice conversation and then mosey on out of here because you know that because you read her mind, knowing that she's like, Jesus Christ, leave me alone. I'm just like, gotcha. Rather than them just be like, oh yeah, we totally play on the same team. Yeah, I'd love to have teams with you. And then like later on, you're still like, she did not want to have teams with me. She was just trying to be the very, very nice. But I will argue with friends. I'm like, she could have just told me to F off. I'm just like, and then look, who's the monster then? I'm like, well, it saves her like 3 or 4 times of this happening. And it saves me from doing this 3 or 4 times. So like, yeah, it's my go-to superpower. People are like, that's a lame superpower. I'm like, man, it saves me in the long haul. Mentally. The last one we have here. Oh, this one's, I like this one. If you lost all your possessions but one, what would you want it to be?
So I got a cat during the pandemic. So if
I would toss him aside, he's not coming. No.
Yeah, exactly. If she I think that's like a given because she's not a possession. She's like basically my child.
A family member.
Exactly. A one possession. I mean, I would be hard pressed to leave my guitar behind if I'm being honest. I have my Taylor, and that is like I love my guitar. It's like we've just been, you know, it's brought me through a lot. But I also have some like family heirloom stuff. Actually, one possession, I know exactly what it would be. Either my guitar or there was a necklace that my parents made me a few Christmases ago, and it had they had like old rings from my grandfather and my grandmother that have all passed away, and they had it made into a pendant.
Okay.
And all of the jewels from the rings are inside of it, but there's the one pendant that is kind of an accumulation of all of these things, like a Go Steady ring that my dad got for my mom and all that kind of stuff. So I think family wise, I'm a big family girl, but that would probably be one of them.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I really don't know what my possession would be because, like, you know what? Like, if it was off the top of my head, I'd be like, oh yeah, I want to take my PS5. But it's like, all right, and what else? Like, what are you hooking your PS5 up to? I'm like, oh, true. It's really it's a deep dive question. I feel like if I had to be like, oh, like honestly, you have to take one thing. I don't know, maybe just a family photo album. That's probably like just something that you're like, all right, like this is it, or I don't know, maybe a pillow, because who knows? Right. It's not as sophisticated or deep dive. It's just like, man, if wherever you're going to take me, can I at least have a comfortable place to lie my head?
That's a good answer.
Yeah. People are like, people are going to be like, you just left everything off the table and you're just going to take a pillow. I'm just like, I can sleep comfortably, like whatever.
Well, all the rest of us have a pendant. We're sleeping on the gravel. Like,
right. At least I have this pendant, and it's like someone's just like, hey, at least I brought my LED lights. I'm like, you hook up the LED lights. You do this. We're gonna create our own jungle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What a rave it'll be.
Yeah, and like Randy Travis, when the world, it's like, what is it? Will the circle be unbroken? We'll play in the background. They'd be like, all right, who's the idiot who brought in the Randy Travis CD without the CD player? Well, I asked for a CD player. They're like, all right, hook them all up. We got it. The last thing I want to ask you, this one's not so random, but it's good. It's like, what's your favorite podcast?
Ooh, what is my favorite podcast? I've actually just got into podcasts the last little bit, but I really do like true crimes. Those are kind of interesting. So there's a Canadian true crimes one that I've been listening to, but honestly, I kind of switch around. Like there's some on like psychology, there's some on relationships. There's just some like general talk stuff, which is always fun too. But the one that I've kind of been more consistent, that or my boyfriend and I listened to one called, is it Behind the Bastards? I think it's called.
Okay.
That one's pretty cool. It's a little bit dark though, to be honest, because it focuses on different people in history and it'll break down their like where they came from and then their not so great
their bastardry
contributions to society.
Man, so I thought you were gonna go with like Tobin Tonight, but like, you know, that's fair.
Oh, of course.
That's a given. No.
I thought that was a given.
That's fair. If someone was just, I feel like if someone was just like, all right, so like we just did a live set. What was your favorite part of the live set? I'm just like, you know, that opening act. They'd be like, yeah, that was my favorite part. They're like, but you came to see me. I'm just like, oh, well, that's a given. But I'm just trying to throw some compliments around.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Jessie T for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.